We are a movement, a purpose. We exist to empower those who strive for more. We grew our roots in Baltimore.
Baltimore is an amazing city. That attitude of that city, it is Under Armour. Baltimore's home.
Man, you know we love this city. We got grit. We're dripping in it.
It's one of the great entrepreneurial stories.
A phenomenon.
The company is expanding its brand.
The OG always takes hits. But we protect it and we grew.
It's us versus them.
Cause our drive to make athletes better is what fueled us.
First handshake they had with the Under Armour brand will be a digital handshake.
Completely revolutionary.
Deal in the history of collegiate sport.
And it wasn't just at home. It was a march across the planet. A movement.
Under Armour, a rising star globally.
Global brand. Internationally, you're killing it.
We celebrate our victories. But you know what? We've got some scars from our journey too.
She is down.
Tom Brady's on the downside of his career.
But the greats, they get back up, reflect on defeat, change their angle, reset the clock, and draw up a new play.
Make no mistake, Under Armour is a growth company.
We love everything that we're getting ready to get into.
Everything's about getting better.
Announcing the launch of the Curry brand.
We empower those who strive for more. And that goes beyond the field.
I'm ready to use my voice to speak up in this moment in history.
Under Armour is working to help fight the coronavirus.
Now it plays for Baltimore.
You spark a nice big movement. You get to represent it together.
We are building a platform that changes lives.
Stops and hits! Kelsey Plum!
Our story is the stuff of legends, and it's only just begun.
So, as I mentioned, like this course is on mindset. We sort of cover your background, your business, and your mindset. We're all just getting back from spring break. You had a very eventful week last week, Kevin. Yeah. You may not have caught. As we were doing the flyer and telling people about this, your title changed. Can you tell us what changed last week, what catalyzed that change, and what you, as the CEO, see going forward?
Yeah. Well, first, maybe you guys can just help me with some context, too. I know it's a mix between business students and science students as well, but what is, how many entrepreneurs in the room, or wanting to be entrepreneurs?
There you go.
Open to it, entrepreneurs?
Oh, very.
Yeah, everybody has the idea for it, because it is great, and hopefully it's part of what was the dream that I had when I was around your ages as well, was, the chance to work for yourself. And more importantly, it was to fulfill whatever that vision was that you came to. And I guess I want to sort of demystify some of what it means to be an entrepreneur, is that there's no moment, there's no clarity, there's no that one thing where the idea is crystallized. There's no, I want to go ahead and build a global, athletic brand to compete with the bigs. The podiums is what I always consider UA. It's like that Nike, Adi, Under Armour, Lulu's now there, of course, and there's other ones that are trying to get there. Puma is sort of on that level. That's the one thing that's my job to protect. And I've been doing it a long time. So this is 27, heading into 28 years of UA. We've now had 19 of those years as a public company. So I've seen a lot of up, a lot of some down, topsy-turvy good. But the news that Professor Velasco was speaking about is I started the company, obviously, took it public in 2005. At the end of 2019, I stepped down from being CEO. We had a professional CEO, and then we had a change of CEOs, and then we had another professional CEO in, and the company that I'd founded that was on a trajectory of growth, for instance, from 2010 to end of 2016, we had 26 consecutive quarters of 20+%, both top and bottom line growth. So you may hear about that in tech, and that's typically because they have contracts with government and other things, but in our business, it's tough, and we're still trying to crack the code on what is our Amazon Prime, which means recurring revenue, which is the most beautiful thing in business. But in our business, unfortunately, every single year, December 31st, 11:59, it clicks over and our revenue base basically goes to zero. And we start over and then we're back to trying to compel or convince a young person like yourselves to either go on your phone or get off your couch, drive to a mall, walk into a store, look at a wall with 15 other brands, shoe brands, and then decide to pick us. Like, the way to do that is really tough. So being excellent or being great, and I'll speak from a lens of A, as an entrepreneur, but I'm also going to speak from a lens as brand, because what Dave's referring to is last week I was named again the CEO of our company, which isn't like a sign of, wow, things must be great, congratulations, Kev. It was much more of our company's not delivering at the way that I wanted it to. We're a fraction of where we've been at some of our peaks in terms of value. And most importantly, I think hearts and minds of, there's a lot of young people in here, and I'm polling the audience because we're real time trying to decide, like, what's the market for a Caitlin Clark? Because you can, we just signed a great young basketball player out of South Carolina, and Juju is like one of the ones we have on the list too. But you're talking about like different market values of like tens of thousands, 100,000 to like millions and millions of dollars, and you're wondering, is one athlete that much more valued than another? And it's a constant left brain, right brain, half of it's perfect, half of it's not good. We just can't figure out which one is which. But in doing that, I assume that the title of CEO, which is like, unfortunately, it's not big enough news because the brand of Under Armour that you see in here is like part of a long history that we have. And make no mistake, like we're a brand to be considered. And just so for your reference of how like our size or scale is, today Under Armour is it's just under a $6 billion-ish business. We've got about 17,000 employees around the world, 40 offices. We do business in 100 countries. We have 1,800 retail stores around the world. And the way that I'm approaching sort of this next chapter for us, which is like coming here, my daughter was asking and saying, Dad, you get nervous when you have to talk? And, I do, like all of us. But today, it just feels so natural and organic to be able to talk about something that I love so much. So I'm pinching myself. I'm approaching this as an entrepreneurial startup that I get the chance to be able to do. And the only thing that's different is that, we're a really healthy company. We got about $1.1 billion of cash on our balance sheet, so that gives us and puts us in a position to say we can make some bets. But we didn't come here to compete with sort of the second tier, the non-podiums, and it's no disrespect to some of the run brands, Mizuno's or Brooks or Asics, and they're good quality, but there's really good ones, Hoka and On, that are coming up in our industry, and then there's the other podium brands, Nike, Adi, Under Armour. So we want to be out there, we want to be competing, and yes, we want to sign the Trojans at some point too. So Jen Cohen is on my call list as somebody who gets a big package from me whenever she'll accept it at the University will let her too.
It's such it's a big change for the company. They're a big change that has impacts on people. First of all, thank you for keeping this date. You've got a lot on your plate. There's a lot happening in your world, and so thank you for sticking with us and coming out. I know you got to see your son, which is awesome.
There, so.
You better keep your head on a swivel. We're going to bring you up here later, James. So
James, get away.
Ivan and Young.
Yeah.
So thank you for being here. What catalyzed that for you? I mean, so you're executive chairman,
yep.
Obviously a major shareholder, the founder, still control the board, I assume. And so you have to have a discussion with your board and say, did you feel like you left prematurely? Because in the arc of a founder story, particularly in tech, there'll be like the founder got it from A to B, 0 to 1. You took it from 0 to 10 as opposed to 0 to 1 in a tech story. And then at some point they might say, we want professional management, whatever that may mean. And you can hire professional management, and they may have a set of skills that maybe the founder doesn't have, particularly in tech when you've got younger people that haven't had the experience. But they're not the founder. They're never going to be the founder. They're never going to bleed the brand, the DNA of it. So what was it in your mind that catalyzed that for you to make the change?
Yeah. It's maybe a little, first of all, the predecessors that I had, there are two of them, there's two of them, really good professionals, that came from big companies had done it before. And, as Professor Velasco says, was it too soon or too early to sort of pass the keys? But, when you're a startup, you sort of go through these different channels. It's like, there's like startup business, small business, local business, regional business, national business, global business. And that whole way you're tracking and you're going, all right, we want to get to 100 grand in revenue. Our first year we did 17,000 in revenue, right? Then it was like the next year we did 110,000. You're like, all right, we want to get to 100 grand. Then we want to get to 500. Then you want to get to a million. You're putting all these sort of benchmarks out there. And you always want to be careful to rate your business of like success as just in terms of dollars, but it's a way to count it. I used to count it in terms of like people or head count and like what would the impact we were having. And you'd want to think about that way, but you were, I want to get the thing to, to 1 million, to 10, to 100 million. And we were able to see that growth. And I never really had an end in mind. I never started Under Armour. And again, hopefully at the very least, I'm talking to at least one entrepreneur today that I'll be able to impact. And I'll give you my story. But I started it and is 23 years old in a little row house in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. And I watched the business. The first 5 years, we grew from 17,000, 110,000, 400,000, 1.3 million, then to $5 million. So our first 5 years took us to grow from 0 to $5 million. The next 5 years, we grew from 5 million to just under 300 million in revenue. That was the year we went public in 2005. The next 5 years, we grew from just under $300 million to crossing $1 billion in 2010. And then the next 6 years, we went from $1 billion to $5 billion. And so, look, they're big numbers, but when you see that or feel that, I never really had the sense. And I always thought about getting to, 5 billion, and that would be a great number. But it wasn't like a number. And there was a moment in time where business got tough. The time I'm talking about is 2010 and 2016. We had all that growth, 26 quarters, 6.5 years of like, yep, Wall Street, and you're getting on an earnings call 4 times a year, and you're going, yep, we just grew 24% again. We just grew 28% again. And with all of that, it had us on this trajectory of growth or success. And then we found out in our industry, because it's really hard, because frankly, our job is playing to the affections of what I'm lucky enough to have 2 in my household, a 20-year-old son, a 17-year-old daughter, like everybody in this room. And do you know how difficult finding your affections are? Or how quickly they change, or how you'll move from one brand to another? And so banking on that, or being able to play to that, you have to be great. You have to be a little paranoid. And I definitely want to talk about that tonight too. But you have to be thinking about where is the next Lululemon, Vuori, Alo. We got them. I mean, yell out the other brands, Aviator Nation. Like we see these other ones that have impacted. And you look back and you're like, how'd you miss that? How did you not make that? But some way, somehow, you do. And all you can do is be your best self. Dust yourself off. Go back and think about the principles, like the foundation of what makes you a company, and that's your team. It always starts with your people. But it starts with mission, vision, values, purpose, empowering those who strive for more. Mission, make all athletes better. Vision, provide you with performance solutions you never knew you needed. And then once you've tried them, wonder how you ever lived without it. It's the product that you're going, man, that thing is awesome. It's Under Armour is the what's it do brand. Like we're meant to be that special sauce that is a product that when you look at it, what makes it UA is not a big, sort of honking UA logo on the left chest, which many of you may see from us sometimes. But it should be, wow, that's a beautiful top. What is it? It's Under Armour. Oh, wow, it's Under Armour. What's it do? Oh, it's got stretch. It's got give. It wicks moisture. Keeps you light. This thing will keep you, dry in a rainstorm. Building out that kind of presence is something that we've been, key on doing throughout our growth. And sometimes it can be hard and you can lose the plot. And I feel like we've, as a brand, had lost the plot. And so the idea isn't, I'm not coming in with a white hat. It's not like there's rooms of people that are saying, congratulations. The great news is that our team is doing that, which is what matters most. And I feel like I've got an extraordinary opportunity. I'm incredibly thrilled to be given this from our board. And our board is not a puppet board that I'm pushing on or coming. Our lead director is a gentleman named Dr. Mohammed El Arian, who is he's the Chief Investment Officer of Alliance. He was the co-CEO with Bill Gross at PIMCO for forever, managing about $2 trillion in assets. So very serious, and a very serious board across the other 7 directors we have too. But this is an opportunity, and frankly, I want to make sure I'm being respectful and saying thank you to the people that have gotten us here. But you know, we're kind of pissed. You know, when in 2019 we had a stock price in the 20s, and we've seen it as low as in the 5s, and those are hard things to sort of stomach as you watch that. And so, first of all, I'm a fiduciary for our shareholders. We want to do a great job for them, but the way to do it isn't focusing on the stock price. It's focusing on building excellent products and making sure that when you say, wow, what a cool top, what's it do? We've got an answer, which is something that nobody else had thought of, and frankly, it's a solution that you never knew existed, and now that you do, you're wondering, man, I want that from UA. So hopefully we can drive and build some of that.
Thank you for the great overview and summary of where you are and sort of where you want to go and why you came back to this role. You never left the company, but being the CEO was a different set of responsibilities. I love that you traced it from $17,000 to $5 billion. We're going to go backwards, just because it's just more relatable to talk as a young person and start there, and then they're going to jump in with some questions. So let's go back to just where you grew up, because it's an important part of your story. What size family, and what did your parents do for work?
Yeah, I was really fortunate. I was the youngest of 5 boys in my household, so it was like get to dinner quick or there wouldn't be food left. My dad was in real estate. My mom was a working mom. She was actually the mayor of my town. She was elected the year I was born, in 1972. She was there until 1983, when then she went and joined the Reagan administration at the time, went to work at the State Department, was there for another 11 or 12 years as the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and liaison with state and local government officials. She was the first mayor of the chapter of the mayor of cities. She has 5 or 6 different firsts that she was. Really super strong, beautiful person who passed away about a year ago. And one of those things that realizes that life does keep moving, but one of the biggest influences in my life for sure. And then my dad was he was a character. He was more like a tennis player. So he was like one of those real estate guys, and I'm not sure how he made money, but I know that at the end my mom was responsible for keeping the banks off of our back from real estate developers, like they're feast or famine, so they live really well, and he did that a few times, but he died early. He died when I was 19 years old of multiple myeloma, and so it was a great lesson for me. But I had a great raised in a great house, middle class, simple, but went to Catholic schools, grew up and was an athlete, a football player. Never liked the way that and I wanted to play big time ball. That's all I focused on and all I ever thought about. So that was sort of like the roots and founding into grade school, high school, prep school, and then college.
Youngest of 5 tells that you probably are competing with your brothers at all time, and they might be, have a size advantage on you and all that stuff. So it probably tells you you're pretty gritty. Early hustles, early indications.
Have you ever been hung by your underwear on a latch as a young kid, and had that been called babysitting before? That's what being the youngest of 5 is really like. Yeah.
You're gonna keep up. Early hustles, early indications that you like being an entrepreneur. Did you have any jobs as a kid? Did you hustle?
Yeah, I'm a big believer that you're not born as an entrepreneur. You've got to practice it. So people here are thinking that they want to do it. I was lucky. It always really came organically to me, is that I wanted to do it, in part because I didn't have an allowance. It was like you were the youngest. My parents did travel a lot, so you're sort of left to fend for yourself. And we never bought anything. We never bought bread that didn't have a big orange sticker that said half off. I never knew it with Jif or Skippy or any of those kind of things. Like, we were store brands and things like that. So if you wanted anything, you had to earn it yourself. So when it snowed outside, growing up just outside of Washington, D.C., jump out of bed, get up in the morning. It wasn't sleep in. It was like, I'm going to go shovel snow. Every summer I had KP Clean Cut Lawn Services. I had 7 lawns that were anywhere from $15 to $30 that I would cut, which was great in the beginning of the summer. But then when it would go into football season, you're trying to figure out how to, come home go to school till 3, practice at 3:30, come home and cut lawns until, from 6 to 7:30 or 8. That's when it becomes sort of a long, difficult task with it. But
hustled lemonade stands, mowing lawns. So you had it early in you that you want, when you come from a family that doesn't have a ton, and you're the youngest of 5, you got to sort of go out and hustle. So similar back, I'm the youngest of 5, not all 5 boys though.
Oh, wow.
And lost my parents. Yeah, so like just always looking to hustle. And then during college, we shared that we both had a hustle in college. What was your hustle in college, and how did you make money?
I was, as a student athlete, so I went to the University of Maryland, where I was a football player, but as a student athlete at the time, I walked on. After my second year, I earned a scholarship at Maryland. Of course, I didn't tell my mother at the time until after my 3rd year, so I could still get book money. What's it going to know with the pride of it? I'm only kidding, I told her. But it was, but there it was. It was like I loved doing it. And so when I was, the only window that you really had around football was between like this thing called winter workouts, which is, after January, and then you'd have to, winter workouts are typically like 5 a.m. Monday, Tuesday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so they can sort of keep you, tabs on you. But there was a window about 2 weeks around Valentine's Day, so I started this thing, Cupid's Valentine Rose Delivery at the University of Maryland, $25 rose delivery. And this was for, every guy that didn't want to spend $80 for a dozen flowers. I went out, I found a wholesaler that would sell me roses at basically 25 cents a stem. My first year, freshman year on campus, sold 100 dozen flowers. Had some friend of mine do a drawing of a Calvin and Hobbes drawing with like Calvin, beating Hobbes in the head saying, why didn't you buy me flowers for Valentine's Day? Built this thing about, sold 100 dozen the first year. My second year, 250 dozen. My 3rd year, like 425 dozen. My senior year, sold 1,186 dozen flowers in a single day. Had 45 drivers, a dozen people delivering the flowers and everything else. And it was where I learned a really valuable lesson because I also bartended on Wednesday night, which we weren't allowed to do, but I'd drive to a place called Bethesda, which is away from College Park. As an athlete, I'd work Wednesdays from 9 p.m. till 12:30. As a bartender, you made good money. And it was one of the things that helped fund Roses. But it was that Rose money that actually, and I also would sell T-shirts at like Grateful Dead shows, Lollapaloozas, HF festivals, Rolling Stones concerts and things. I was the guy in the parking lot that would get the bootleg T-shirts with the misspelled band names on the back and walking around selling for $20 at the beginning of the festival, $15, $10, whatever you could get the shirts for. So there was always something. And I guess to the entrepreneurs, the lesson from that last sort of soliloquy is you got to practice it. And you got to love it. And you got to find the fun in it too. And that's where I, brought my friends into the loop. And whether it was roses or flowers or, what now is my wife, who was back then helping me, is, valuable lessons learned. We also had guys that weren't so bright working for us. And when you imagine things like I'm going to do a rose delivery business, and the goal was to sell, I said 1,186 dozen flowers in a day. I only remember that because of the 314 dozen flowers that I'd meant to sell 1,500, and watching my opportunity cost die was really brutal. And realizing that, 2 days putting flowers together, like in this row house in Georgetown, all the windows down. It's, February in DC at the time. The windows wide open, air conditioning all the way down, trying to blow it as like hard as it could get to get cold in there. 1,500 dozen flowers like stacked up in roses and boxes, and then all of a sudden like taking a dozen, taking my wife, who's a nursing student at Georgetown, and saying, thanks so much for your help. Here's a dozen flowers for you, honey. She says, oh, thank you, it's so sweet. Kisses me. I've been up for 2 days straight. Opens a dozen, like, hey, Kev, just want to let you know there's only 9 flowers in here. I said, what do you mean it's 9? Sorry about that. Let me grab another one. Wait a second, there's 15 flowers in this one. And then I'm looking over at the guys that were packing flowers, like, did you guys put 12 in there? And they're like, excuse me? Like, what do you mean? I didn't know you were talking about a dozen. So anyway, make sure I never want to deal in live inventory again, and make sure the people that work with you can count to 12. Yeah, that's it's a good lesson learned for that one.
The math majors.
But I made 17 grand netted from that, which ended up becoming the seed money that effectively I was able to start Under Armour with. Plus the credit that I built along the way, got 5 credit cards, up to $40,000 in cash. And so my financing wasn't, angel capital, or it was credit cards. It was selling $1,000 a point. If you give me 10 grand, I'll give you 10% of the company. And I'd had that offer out there before when you're desperate, because cash is so critical in a startup. And it's like, I don't know if I'll do that. And people are like, all right, I'll give you 10 grand. All right, I'm gonna need it soon. And they're like, all right, I'll get your check next week. No, I need it like now. And they're like, all right, let me write you a check. I'm like, no, you don't understand. We got to go to the bank, withdraw from your account, have it in my account by 4 o'clock if you want this to happen. So welcome to, if you want to be an entrepreneur, get ready to run a little bit of casino roulette there.
Put yourself, before we dive into Under Armour, or continue sort of on that path, put yourself in their position. You're, approximately 40, how many people are seniors right now? Yeah, so 30-40% of the class are seniors. Some wondering what their job or career path is. There's some anxiety over that. What was going through your mind at 22 years old? What was your thought process upon graduating University of Maryland and going to the world? Did you have a clear path? What did you know about yourself at that point?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to work for myself, but you don't have that confidence either. And it's nice because you guys are out there and you go to a great school, so you'll have, the big firms will come to you, and I don't know how many, finance, accounting majors and things, but I remember watching other kids in the business school, going off to, Ernst & Young and KPMG, and they're getting offers, and all of a sudden they're getting these big jobs. And I remember there's this one guy who was a football alumni, and he was an insurance guy. He worked for Prudential. There's nothing wrong with insurance, but it was like the one job offer that I had coming out of college. And I'd had the idea for Under Armour, and I was working on it because it was really it was the fall of my senior year. So it was the fall of 1995 where I came up with the idea, or it was spring break of 1994 when I came up with the idea for Under Armour. It was driving back from spring break with 3 other guys in a car for 24 hours from Fort Lauderdale Beach home, and it was like I'd spent 5 days with these guys in spring break. It was like I can't listen to another word. Like I can't hear these guys. I'm tuning out, and just sort of locked myself in and driving. And it was there that I sort of drew this little sketch and came up with the idea. But where was I going with that, Dave?
Just so where were you at 22 years old, and what did you know about yourself? You didn't want to work for somebody else. Yeah. What are there advantages to being young and naive? That's a good one.
Yeah, 100%. So the idea for Under Armour was there. I'll never forget, though, I got an offer from Prudential Insurance to take a job with them. And the first interview that I had, the guy said, do me a favor, write down everybody that you know has a net worth you think over $500,000. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. And I don't know, maybe we'll talk again. But I was kind of like in this interview process. And I remember I went home because before cell phones, I went home from my dorm room to my mom's house. And I remember I go up to her desk, and there's this little note on the desk, and it was from 10 days before, and it said, Kevin, call Joe so-and-so from Prudential. And I remember seeing the note, and I'm like, why didn't she tell me this? Like, what is this? And my mom comes home, I'm like, Mom, how did you not give me this message? Why did you not tell me this? And my mother's like a self-described, she was like a tough old broad, like a tough gal. Like she was like, I'm the mayor of the town, like I'm in charge. And she just said, oh, who are you kidding? You're never gonna go work for anybody else. Like she was the one that sort of called me out on it. It's like, she's like, don't give me a hard time. And it was part of that, I knew I wanted to do what I wanted to do, but I didn't know it was going to be Under Armour. It wasn't like this clear image of go build, performance apparel. It was, I was like, I might do a rose delivery system or service was one of the things, and frankly, it was before 1-800-ROSES, and would I figure that out? I don't know, but I'll tell you, the mentality I had was it happened to be sports, and that happens to be my passion and my love. But if you have the mentality of an entrepreneur, it really wouldn't matter what it is. That all you're going to do is it's part of a curse and a burden, because you're going to walk into most rooms and you're going to look and focus on, unfortunately, the 5% of things that are wrong versus the 95% of things that are great or perfect. And so you have to find that balance in your head of celebrating the wins or celebrating beauty or being happy about it and not just dissatisfied, because the entrepreneur mindset is like, how can I make it better? What can we do to enhance or impact that? So, but I want to make sure everyone in here knows, like, there wasn't like this clear image or vision that I had. So don't dissuade yourself if you don't have the clear picture yet or today.
Yeah, very rarely does sort of the lightning strike and the skies open and you have your vision. It's a result of working it, trying to solve. You just talked about seeing things that can be, trying to solve a problem. He set out to solve a problem. Why do we wear these cotton T-shirts under our pads that get soaked and heavy? It gets you cold on top of it. All those things when you play in cold weather states. So he was solving a problem, and had no idea that it would be a global apparel brand at some point. One more sort of origin story, and then we'll sort of come forward into culture. This series, and we tend to, I don't say romanticize, there are a lot more successful entrepreneurs sit here than people that have failed. It's brutally hard. And in the beginning, there was a point where you didn't have enough money to pay the bills. And you had a brilliant idea that you were going to go to Atlantic City and win it back. So tell us about just the night and the lesson of what you learned at that toll booth. And don't sugarcoat it.
Yeah. I mean, this is when you're starting, like for any entrepreneur, and I don't know, maybe it's different now because maybe there's more capital around, but when I was doing it, literally the financing that I used was my own cash, which was 17 grand, the $40,000 over 5 credit cards that I built up, that I blew through. And then I basically went to like friends and family. And the whole time, like, you hear cash is king, cash is queen in any business. Like I reflect, because one of the things that happened last week when we made this announcement, there was a lot of sort of input or feedback from the street, which is, I'm a top line guy. You just want to grow, and there's concern of like, you're going to be focused enough on bottom line and earnings versus just growing. But like when you're an entrepreneur, like I remember sitting there with in business, and you see those like blue checks that you get. Maybe you work for do side jobs or something, like the long blue checks, and they got the page, but maybe doesn't exist anymore. But I'd sit there every night and just balancing my checkbook and playing the float of, I wrote 2 checks, but I mailed the checks out, and they probably haven't received them yet. It'll take them a couple days to get in the bank, and can I use that bank float over here? You're constantly just back and forth on that all the time, and it is so difficult finding, keeping up with the capital. And it's one thing that is probably the most difficult aspect of being able to do for any entrepreneur, is like, just how do you keep up with the cash? How do you keep it straight?
So you didn't have enough money in the account to pay your bills, and you decided to go to Atlantic City and win the money back. How did that go?
So I had $700 in the bank. I went and pulled the $700 out, and I'm like, I need $3,000. I had $3,000 worth of checks out, because in our business it was fabric first, and then it was like a long lead time for fabric, but you only had so much credit that you had to pay. So basically getting the cash up front. I'd written $3,000 worth of checks. I took out $600. I'm going to go to Atlantic City and win it. Drive up there, lucky and smart enough to fill my car up with gas, walk in, take the $600, lost a little, won some back. Next thing you know, I didn't just win the $3,000, I won the $5,000, and then of course I started thinking greedy and going, would it be great if I had $10,000. Went for the $10,000, lost everything, like every last nickel. And this was like 6 months into Under Armour. So the $17,000 was gone. This is my last bit of money. I have to get in the car, I have to drive home from Atlantic City back to Washington, D.C. and Georgetown, where I started the company. And I hadn't contemplated for toll booths. And so this is where, like, pulling up to a toll booth, like, in case you know this, like, if you can't pay your toll, the person comes out, they take your driver's license, they write it down, it stops everybody in traffic. They're like, what's the matter? They're like, you can't even pay your toll? So that night, I come home, I end up make it through the tolls. It's like I got 5 tickets for not being able to pay any of the tolls on the Delaware Memorial Bridge from Atlantic City back to DC. I get home, I didn't have enough money for cash. I mean, like when you're broke, like no change, like in your car, like no money whatsoever. So my mother, I said, a real strong, powerful, tough woman, the worst cook in the world. And I was like, I didn't have any place to go, so I drove to my mother's house for dinner, and I'm thinking, I'm dead broke, these checks are gonna bounce, I'm totally screwed, what are we gonna do? But I kept my P.O. box. I was living in D.C. at this place right by my mother's house, and I'll never forget, it was 6 months in, the first team that I'd ever sold was Georgia Tech, and they'd spent about $7,000 that they had with me. And I ended up coming home, go to my mom's house, and I remember her saying, because you'll find this, is that optimism really does matter. People would ask and say, you know, how's Under Armour? It's like, oh, it's doing great. So I come to mom's like, how's everything going? I'm like, I'm doing great, Mom. Everything's perfect. And trying to hold it in for myself. And then I remember going and checking that P.O. box that night. And for whatever reason, you know, you can say God has a plan, serendipity, purpose, belief, letting go, whatever aspect of that you'll believe in. And there was that first check from this institution, Georgia Tech, that was in there for like $7,800. And I'll never forget, because that day I sat in my car, and after I left my mother's house, I did have a good cry. And sitting there and going, you could have done roses, I was gonna do this crab cake thing, decided to do this t-shirt thing, and look, you're out of money, we're bust. And I did, I almost second guessed myself. And then I remember when I opened that P.O. box and saw that check, it was like it was the biggest affirmation I could ask for, and say, I'll never second guess or question myself again. I may not win, but I'm not gonna quit or not believe in myself. And so that moment was probably one of the most important ones. Cashed the check, paid everybody off, and then all of a sudden, I did not go back to Atlantic City after that, so I'd stopped getting. I learned my lesson.
It's emotional. If you've started a business, when someone gives you business and writes you a check or invests in your business, it's emotional because they're believing in you. It's just, you talked about affirmation and validation. It really is a powerful thing when someone votes with their pocketbook or their wallet and says, we believe in you.
And then making somebody money, like being an earner, is like, it's one of the biggest highs that I can't describe for you. And that's the thing where, you know, what I do think about where Under Armour is right now is, Ray Lewis is the voiceover that you hear, and he's a big fixture, but he's a learned, experienced, you know, good person. But he has an expression he says called pissed off for greatness. And there's a moment where we may get there in life, but we are certainly one of those brands or companies that is pissed off for greatness of showing them how great we can be. But when you have that, when you're making your private equity investors and you're making them money, and we had some great ones. The Fisher family from the Gap was one of our big investors. Rosewood Capital, the hotel chains that you've heard of, and it's a high. And you want to do it for yourself, but you want to do it for your team. You know, you want to do it for their families. You want to do it for the community. You want to do it because you do have a chip on your shoulder, and you probably do want to show them all. And so that'll be part of it as well, which is perfectly human, but keep it in check at the same time.
I'm going to actually start asking students to ask some questions directly, so we'll get into them. Alina, you got a good question on sponsored athletes and partnerships?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, Kevin. My question was, so Under Armour has a lot of like high-profile athletes as partners, recently Steph Curry. So my question was, what do these partners mean for Under Armour, and what values do you look for when you look out for partners, and how do you kind of grapple with partners that you wanted and maybe lost to other companies? Yeah. So I'm really interested about hearing about that process.
The question was about sports marketing and how you make the decision for super high-profile athlete like a Steph Curry. I mean, when we signed Steph in 2012, he'd been in the league for 3 years. 12 or 13, yeah, he'd been in the league for 3 years. He'd been with Nike. They messed up his re-signing. They left, like, it was part of the KD pitch was just left over. They didn't have his name in there. There was a few things that they mistaked. But it wasn't like, you know, magic that got the athletes. And I'll start with some of the cute when you find out, like, how did you sign or pick Steph Curry? It was his daughter Riley actually had just been born. And at the time, he'd set up on his account, he's like, boy, what should I do? And this is some of the science that comes with it. We'll take a little luck. And thank you, Riley. But he set up 3 shoe boxes with the shoe on top. Here was the Adidas, here was the Nike, and here was the Under Armour. And he basically was sitting on the couch, and his daughter, I think Riley was like 1 or 1.5 at the time. He says, and he just sort of laughing, he goes, what do you think I should do, Riley? And she got up and like stumbled over like a little kid, picked up like the Adidas shoe on the left and was like, threw it over his shoulder. Picked up the Nike shoe, threw it over his shoulder, grabbed the Under Armour shoe, walked back and like, here, Daddy. I wish there was a little more science to it, but it proved to be
You're a genius, Kevin.
Yeah, exactly. So don't think too much of it. But at the time, like we've had the luxury of having, like you think of some of the high points that we've had as well. Like 2015, we had all 4 major sports MVPs, plus the number one golfer, number 2 tennis player. So Jordan Spieth in golf, Andy Murray in tennis. It was Cam Newton actually in football. It was Bryce Harper in baseball. So we had, it was like, we had Steph in basketball, Carey Price in hockey, and it was like this collection that you can't bet for that. Some of the things when we're making decisions on like what do we do with our athletes or how do we get them, you have to figure out how to play Moneyball because we're a bigger company, but Under Armour frankly is a company that in our space, we're too big to be a little company, but we're too little to be a big company. And so Under Armour last year will have spent over $550 million in marketing. I don't think it feels like we spent that much money, which means we're not probably spending it well enough right now. And so how we approach, and we can really take that back. But you have to think about, is it worth going after the investment of like a Stephen Curry, who's somebody when we signed him in his first contract was $1.5 million, right? His second contract was like $11 million. His latest contract, it's been released out there too, but you get upwards of $25-30 million. And so you have to decide. There was a year that Tiger Woods once played the Masters golf tournament, and the bet that they had in Vegas was you could either bet Tiger Woods, because his odds were like even odds, or you could bet the field. So there was 80 golfers, and you could bet one guy, you bet the other 79. Which one would you play with? It's the same thing we think now. We're thinking about Caitlin Clark, is that her market is very different than hundreds of thousands. She's in the millions, and you're going, boy, you could NIL deals or do other things with this money, and we could go sign 50 college basketball players, or you could sign one Caitlin Clark. So like, what's the money trade there? It's a constant game of Moneyball. It's a constant game of back and forth. Should the money be in college? Should you put it in professional? Did you do it on teams? We've had Tottenham Hotspur in the EPL before. Do you sign big players? We had a guy, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Do you put it on Tom Brady? Do you lean it on Jordan Spieth? Or do you go with a youth program? So it's one of the things, frankly, which is incredibly real time for us right now, and I'm not sure there's a perfect answer, but if I could, I'd go hire Riley Curry and see if I could just get her to go pick all the athletes for us.
The science.
Yes.
I spoke to Sean Eggert and Marcos DeSantos in your global marketing group a few weeks ago.
Cool.
And they really sort of educated me. It was in connection with my favorite Olympic sport, beach volleyball. Mm-hmm. And in deciding which athletes to sign for the company, they spoke about story. Can you tell us why story is important to the overall brand and the individual athletes with whom you partner? Tell us why story matters so much for Under Armour.
I mean, so the 4 foundations, and I want to be careful because Under Armour's been around a long time, 28 years, and I appreciate you asking the questions about the past, and I wish I'd kicked it off this way, but the last thing that I want to talk about, especially assuming this new chair, and today's my 7th day in the role again as CEO, is all I want to talk about is the future. But like some of the things that built Under Armour is I keep these whiteboards in my office as a former athlete. They'd write down, they'd say things on them like overpromise and deliver, dictate the tempo, walk with a purpose, find a way, kind of cultural statements or sayings that would make or be, what or who we are. At the center of it, though, always written in red ink, and my daughter now draws this for me. It has some wisdom that just says, yeah, that's great, all these other things you do, athletes you sign, etc. In the center, it just says, don't forget to sell shirts and shoes. Like at the end of the day, that's what we do. And so the tenets of like how we accomplish that is probably something that would work for any business. And so I use these 4 things, which I always use as a defining, like, what's my job as CEO? And it's maintaining, ideas and competency on 4 important things: product, story, service, and team. Number 1, make the best product. Like at the end of the day, if we screw everything else up, as long as we have great product, we'll be okay. Today, I don't think we do. Like I think one of the things you'll see from us is one of the best business advice ever given in business was actually from our industry. And it was when a guy named Mark Parker took over at Nike in 2004 or 5. Steve Jobs was still alive, and Parker knew Jobs because they were involved in business a little bit. And he asked me, he said, hey, Steve, I'm taking over this huge company. Can you give me some advice? And probably only the way like a Steve Jobs could, looked at him in the eye and just said, why don't you guys stop making so much crappy stuff? And frankly, like as I'm approaching Under Armour, like I'd like to cut what we do in half. I'd like to just find the things that we love. And so product, number one, is that. But when you make product that's that great, number two, what's the story for the product? Right? Like, how are you going to communicate it? How do you talk about it? Because our greatest product should be the way that we convey the story, because the world doesn't need another capable apparel or footwear manufacturer. The world needs a hope. The world needs a dream. What Under Armour is supposed to be is like, you're supposed to see a product and go, fuck yeah. Like, look, that's awesome. Like, how do I dream with that? Do I have a product that would represent that? Quick sidebar. Sorry, this is a commercial break. It's going to cost you, Dave. At the Masters, in just a few weeks, you're going to see a product unveiled, which is the new Under Armour Stealth Form Cap. This is for your eyes only. Don't release this yet or not. And this is a product that we have, which we think is pretty unique, because what makes baseball caps compelling to anybody else in the world, it's always the logo that's on the front. And for us, for the first time, we've built a hat, which is as much about the performance of the hat itself, that actually this thing can crush up into a ball. It feels like Under Armour. It'll absorb your sweat. It's got Under Armour IsoChill, UPF 50 plus a mile. And it's a hat that the first time that Jordan Spieth misses a shot, a putt, or anything else, this is contractual with him at this point. He's not going to throw a club. What he's going to do is take this hat, you just saw me ball up, he's going to throw it on the ground, and he's going to jump on it as many times as he can. And then we're going to pop it up, and then we're going to find out how we can have our announcer say, wow, that's what Under Armour should be, that it looks and feels like a product, which is, how much do you guys pay for this, by the way? No, I'm only kidding. I'm not going to ask you that. But it's like, but I don't know if you've seen but it's a lid, which is, Kevin, it's a hat. But it's a hat where nobody's ever built a performance hat. There's a company called Mellon doing some neat things right now. But our job is going in where we can make the battlefield small, because our competition is Nike. And it's like, you got to compete with these guys. It's like, man, it's really hard to do that. So when we can make the battlefield really small and just go, I'll tell you what, it's like, you want to play basketball? Like, we'll go fight with you about it. We're sending Curry. Who are you guys going to send? You want to do golf? Like, we'll send Spieth. You want to fight and compete in uniforms? Like, we're going to outfit, the Naval Academy. You guys outfit Army. Like, we'll have these moments where we can spar and fight and battle, and we can pick something like this. It really matters. Product, story, service. Service is all the other pieces that go into what you do. It's showing up on time, your supply chain, like making sure the product matters, right price, right time, right place, all those things. And then fourth and most importantly is the team. It's what I'm focused on right now more than anything. And speaking about like where a UA is that we've been through this transition, but the place where the greatest alignment that our CEO and myself have been is in building the team that we have at our executive table. We have some badasses, a designer, a guy named John Barbados, who's sort of a legend in the industry. We just hired a guy named Yassine Saidi, who came from long tenure at Adi, and then he ran the select business for Puma. And then the last 4 years, he's actually been doing collabs, working with brands of helping to relate with artists, and specifically for actually Rihanna and The Weeknd. But he's one of the cool kids who, like, having him at UA to make sure that we can check that box, performance, innovation, all those pieces. But just a killer team. The CEO, former CEO from The Gap, 30 years there, understand, expert at retail. So, like, I love our team, but you have to love your team. It's the most important thing, and your team needs to know that you love them. Because I think the most important thing for any leader in today's world has to be great empathy that you have for understanding what everyone's going through. The world's tough. It's not easy, and I think that empathetic leadership is something which is really important. So I love the team that we have, and I can't wait to win for the 17,000 teammates that count and rely on our brand every single day.
That's a killer product, by the way. That's
awesome.
It feels like Under Armour. It feels like the original Under Armour that was different and going to have people knock it off. People are going to say, like, why didn't we think of that? But it really, I mean, no one's revisited the baseball cap in forever. Try packing a baseball cap. Try, traveling with a baseball cap. So I can't wait till it comes out, and I think it's a $40, 35, 40.
Thank you. I'd like to go 50, but I'm listening right now. So, but we'll find. But you're in the ballpark. But it is. It's meant to be like a squeeze for your head, which is just meant to be nice and lovely. So anyway, we'll find out how smart we are if it works. But if you see Spieth, you can tell your friends, yeah, I saw that.
That's awesome.
Let me tell you this Riley Curry story. Go for it.
Mohit, where's Mohit? You're gonna have to speak up. You had a good question because we're talking him story, and Baltimore's always been part of your story. Yeah. You have a question about Baltimore.
Why and how is Baltimore such a great bit of the story of Under Armour, and can you share the reason behind the great part and how it aligns with Under Armour's core values?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. So the question was about Baltimore is a big part of our story for our company, and part of it was, you know, one of the things that happens when you all find success is you'll also feel this bit of like obligation that we're supposed to give back. That obligation for us, you know, you're thinking because I didn't think, especially as a sports brand, a consumer-facing sports brand, or any company, the consumer's not going to care what you say until they know that you care. What's important to you? And one thing I always thought that matters was that you loved your hometown. I made a very big point about sticking a flag in the ground and doing it in a city like Baltimore, which is a complicated place. But it really is defining of us. It's this underdog grit, sort of blue collar, lunch pail, work boots. And I thought it really fit the DNA of the brand. And so those were the things when I moved from DC and moved up to Baltimore, I kind of liked that about us. And it gave us this destination. One of the things that I did, though, is part of that making the city important. I think it also, though, led to some of the things that allowed when, over our 28-year history, thinking about investing in our town, you know, over-indexing on our town, making sure that, number one, we have a responsibility to be fiduciaries to our shareholders. But I thought it was playing chess and demonstrating how much we loved our town by how we invested in it. And what I did personally as an entrepreneur, I thought I could leverage and work back and forth with sharing the resources I could do as a citizen to help Under Armour as a company. And some of the things we did, it was you know, assembling a 260-acre parcel right in the Baltimore waterfront as you come up 95. 46 million cars a year, you know, between DC and New York, driving up and building this development that was going to be our headquarters. And the way that doing something other than just selling shirts and shoes convinced people that may be a distraction, I look back on that and no, I didn't spend a minute less doing it, but what it might have done for other people to think about being distracted, I'd like to fix that. But one of the things we did do is we did just signal and just say, Baltimore is going to be our home and we're going to stand for that town. And in doing it, we've had, you know, major investment from myself personally, but especially from the company. You know, the company, I mean, one of the things we're most proud of is that, you know, we've got a program called Project Rampart, where if you want to talk about changing lives, in a city like Baltimore, graduation rates are about 63%, which sits somewhere between embarrassing and criminal. If we can convince a kid to play sports, each of their 4 years in high school, those graduation rates go from 63% to 98%. And this is validated data that we have, over 70,000 kids that we've been running for close to over the last 8 years, where we've had that many kids through our programs. And Project Rampart, 24 public high schools in Baltimore City. Under Armour outfits every varsity team, every football team, baseball team, volleyball team, ping pong team gets new Under Armour swag. The coaches do as well. And it's just kind of that simple, that you're watching these kids feel like, wow, somebody loves me. The coaches are like, I want to coach on that team. And so we have a great affection and affinity for our hometown. But I think the reason is it really was always chess. Now I'm interested in playing a lot more checkers and being a lot more close to the heart. But one thing that will not change is we've got a new headquarter building going up, 280,000 square feet. It's platinum LEED certified as well because ESG is incredibly important to us and our company. It's right on the Baltimore waterfront. It's visible off 95 as you drive through it. And it's part of a campus that we have with several buildings and a field right in the middle that a lot of our local high school teams that play on there. And so for the company, our team gets to see and watch kids like live it, breathe it, feel it, talk it, walk it. All that stuff really matters. And so I'm proud of that relationship, but make no mistake, we are a global brand who happens to be based, you know, in that town. But we love where we're based.
Fits the brand. Joshetta? You had this is an interesting question coming from you. Yeah, go ahead. I like it.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. And before I tell you my question, I just want to let you know my dad is a huge fan of Under Armour, head to toe all the time. So.
You know this is mildly insulting. I'm sure your dad's a super cool guy, but the idea of I mean that in a loving way. As we're fighting for your guys' affection, we're not going to reject your father at all. So tell him, as a 51-year-old, I am absolutely thrilled.
First of all, he's younger than us. Then she just said he's really hip too, so right?
Okay, cool.
I don't know how old he is, so I don't know.
Very good, I'll take that.
I've seen you quote Mike Tyson a lot. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Great quote. Given the numerous punches you've faced in your journey, some of which you've repented today, do you have a personal philosophy or something that you fall back on that guides your decision making after taking a hit? Do you see some sort of a mindset pattern in how you manage these constant punches?
Yeah, I believe that you can't, you have to lead from the front. You do that with empathy, you do that with love, you do that with listening. I like to say that I feel like coming back into this role, I've learned more in the last 4.5 years of not being a CEO, and probably the first, as much at least as the first 24 that I was a CEO. You have to realize is that it's hard for people to talk to you. It's hard for people to communicate with you. And so you have to do an extra good job of listening, of making sure that people aren't telling you what you want to hear, but you can really break through that noise. It's hard. When you're in a public position, it doesn't have to be true. It just has to be a story that someone can write. It doesn't mean that there's never a basis there or anything else, but it's like we've lived that, and we've been through everything from papers coming after you, setting up, renting apartments in town to find out who they can talk to, government agencies' investigation, and there's nothing you can do about that. And you'll never get back, 6 years of the SEC or DOJ taking 35 million documents from you to download in all your electronic devices on everything that you've ever had, and saying, how can we truncate together a few lines? And it doesn't mean you have to be thoughtful and you have to be aware of it, but you're kind of going, is this fair? Like, why is this happening to me? And are you ready to quit or give up? I got to tell you is that I've always lived you have to stay in the fight. Like, there's lots of things. If you press me in an elevator for one piece of advice, I would just say resilience. I'd say keep your jersey, and if you weren't resilient, and if you did something, you had bad behavior or something else, like whether it's the board or the government or anybody else, you're not able to do it. So I get this opportunity, and I'm pinching myself right now. But I'm also wise enough to not be that 32-year-old who took the company public, or the 42-year-old who was like understanding we were kind of in this middle of this like great glide path, to appreciate, respect it, protect it, fight for it, and never take a second or a day of it for granted. And so one thing I'll tell you is that you can hear every cliche in the world of like, you'll find out how strong you are when you get punched in the face. But whatever it is, just get back up. Just hang on to your jersey. Don't let them walk you out the room. Don't let them get you out the door. And I mean that. Like, if you're asking for like advice, like if you wanted me to get passionate about advice, I'd look at my kids and say, don't you ever, ever, ever give up. Don't let anybody else tell you how good you are, how smart you are, how strong you are, how pretty you are, handsome. None of it matters, right? It's how you feel and believe in yourself, and you got to walk that each and every single day.
That's a good one. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Does the mic work or does it not work? I'm going to give the mic around. All right. Students from my class, please enroll. Get the first option. Jessica, Ebony, who wants to question? We're only going to get a few of them. You got it. I see you.
Mr. Plank, my name is Adam Benji. I want to say shout out to you. I love your energy, man. I could tell you're a real entrepreneur. I feel it.
Thank you.
No, when you took out that hat and you like sold it to everyone in the room, I thought it was beautiful.
I got a shoe I could sell you too, but
hey, I'll pay anything.
I'm honestly not lying, but yeah, keep going.
I love your energy, man. I gotta respect it. I want to ask you, when you first started and when you're selling accounts, did you do the calls yourself? How did you sell accounts when you first started, and how did you scale to the level you scaled to? Because I have a business myself, and my biggest issue is I don't know what the next step is I want to get bigger. I want to make this even bigger, but I don't know what to do next. So I want to know, what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, look, for entrepreneurs starting out, you're always trying to act bigger than you are. For me, when I started, I used to keep 2 business cards. I kept a business card. It said Kevin Plank, president. And so ever I was dealing with a fabric mill or a supplier, I'd always use that business card for them. And that way they knew the buck stopped here, put it there, look them in the eye, all that stuff. And then whenever I talked to an account, I was 23. So I was talking to people who's this sales rep? And they didn't want to know it was just some entrepreneur in his grandma's basement that was starting the company. So it was much more about, because there's the same people that asked me for a discount. Hey, so you're the president, I need a better price from you. So I used to have a card that would just say sales manager. And that way it's hey, can I get a better price? He's man, I'd love to give you a better price. I'm sorry. The old lady with the bag of money back in D.C. would never go for it, our president, so let me keep it, let's keep this separate between the two of us. Now I'd have to change voices when I'd answer the phone because it was just me in grandma's basement, Under Armour, how can I help you? But yeah, you go on every call. There's not a job that you don't do. And believe me, the difference between being just an entrepreneur and being a leader, to be a CEO, because there's a lot more to being a great CEO than being a great entrepreneur. It's probably one of the things I've learned most. And it really is empowering and trusting your team. But knowing that you can get them there. But I have the benefit as an entrepreneur of having done every job in the company at one point in time, which doesn't make you an expert in all of it, but it certainly gives you a passion and understanding and empathy with your team. So that's why my focus now is finding and hiring, the best talent in the world that, I talked about Barbados and Yassine, and we have another huge hire that we're going to be announcing really, really shortly too. So things like that matter. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not you're the CEO, everybody else does stuff. You got to do things because your team also, they want to know that you'll bleed with them too. I think it matters.
Thank you so much. You really pumped me up. I'd love to grab a beer with you sometime.
Yeah, man, thank you.
We're laughing, but to be that comfortable in selling in this environment is a big skill. If you haven't taken the course on sales mindset, I really recommend it. I once was in between undergrad and law school for those 3 or 4 months. I sold cars at my USC roommate's father's dealership. And I was so oh, that's not prestigious enough. So when I was interviewing for investment banking positions, I took off the sales job because it wasn't distinguished enough. And the guy looks at me and he goes, selling cars is the best experience you've ever had for being an investment banker. To be able to ask somebody for their business, to do a product demo in front of somebody, that takes something. You got to get comfortable asking people for the business. There's my sermon.
Thank you so much for being here. I am also working to build a team, and so I'm really interested, who is your first hire, and what is the single most important thing you look for in a new employee?
My first hire was my wife because she'd do it for free. So it was more of a partnership, let's say. But it was convincing people, to join the team. So when I started, it's funny when some of the things, the press that we've had at UA has been, I was a football player, so it's a bunch of athletes there, that's, sort of dragging knuckles and looking to build this. And you're going look, my environment was the athletes that I knew. That was my world. And that was when I talked to student athletes in other schools. I'm look, I was the same age you were. And make no mistake, look left and look right, because in the same thing that you guys can have now is the friend to your left and right is very well going to be the executive who's fast-tracking a president at Disney or, moving to JP Morgan or moving up. And you watch sort of these networks grow. But the reason Under Armour started was because, A, a great product, but it was as much about the team that I knew. Because so I said to Dave, in my high school team, we had a pretty good team. I had 11 guys go to sign Division I in scholarships for my high school team. A prep school that I went to was another year of high school. I didn't get a scholarship, so I went there to get another look. We had a really special class. We had 23 guys from my high school team, or from my prep school team, who ended up signing Division I scholarships. 13 of them ended up getting drafted to the NFL. 4 of them were first-round draft picks, and 1 guy won the Heisman Trophy, a dude named Eddie George. So coming out and then I went to Maryland, there was 20, 25 guys playing the NFL at any given time. So the network that I realized I had that I leveraged and utilized was who are these partners and players? When I was trying, the first thing as an entrepreneur, I was trying to convince my friends to come work, who wanted to be my startup partner. And then you're dealing with this dynamic of, well, why should I work for you? why aren't you working for me? You're like, well, I don't know. I got the idea of the T-shirt. What do you have? Like, I got 17 grand. What are you bringing to the party? And so, well, I'll get 5% of the, you know, so there's like all these dynamics that happen. I'm always like, wait, there weren't like the 10 people from Harvard lining up at grandma's basement in Georgetown going like, man, I really want to work here. It was like, you have to use what you can use. So I don't think there's any skill to it, but, and I wouldn't sit here and profess, you know, find loyal, find this, like, find hungry, find passion. You know, find somebody that's not doing it because they want to check a box and say, I was a resume entrepreneur for a minute. But like, find that belief. But my first partner, you know, he's still one of my dear friends that I had today. And there's another one of my partners that's here as well who live with me. But he had a portion of the company and this other partner left. And it was sort of like, I can only imagine what that felt for him. But it was, he didn't believe, you know? And then I have another one of my partners, Billy McDermott, who's sitting right there, who was one of my friends from Fork Union, the prep school that I mentioned, who was one of my first partners at UA as well, who came after he did a stretch in the military and a few other things. But it was, you'll find the right ones. I give a little bit of caution, like family, friends, those things. But there's something you'll have of like, I just want somebody I can look in the eye and I can really trust. Like, trust is something that's built. You know, whiteboard statements, I have something that says, you know, trust is something that's built in drops and it's lost in buckets. And so, like, you'll have that with relationships, you'll have that with your business and anything else that you do, but you'll find your way. You'll know when you have the right ones. So, thank you for the question.
Questions? There's going to be a lot of them. From class, right? Yes, I recognize you.
So you said about like not hiring your family and your friends, and I know you also said that you hired your wife and she was the first person you hired. How do you, I like come from two family businesses, and how have you gone about working with family and friends, and what have like some of the challenges been with that?
It's really complicated. Again, I got 4 older brothers that have all been around and some version of funded this company as well, and some of those conversations of give me, 10 grand for 10%, but like, you got to have it now, like we got to drive to the bank and do that. That doesn't breed great relationships with brothers and things. So I think you just have to be cautious with it. You're going to be comfortable working with friends, especially now. And I wouldn't discount either, as I mentioned, my first businesses were shoveling snow, mowing lawns, lemonade stands, t-shirt businesses, crab cake businesses, rose businesses, and other things. You have to practice it. And so I wouldn't have a hard and fast rule of no friends, no family, or anything else, but I wouldn't look and say, I'm just looking for somebody to be loyal to me. Like, you have to have an exchange, and you have to understand what they're looking for, too. Ego will come into it eventually. I hate 50-50 deals. Somebody has to be able to call snow days, meaning like, come to work or don't come to work, or what are we doing? You can't have everything be a break. We were in the movie Any Given Sunday, in 1999, there was something called Y2K, which is the world thought that all the computers, when they flipped over in year 2000, was going to like put the world out of business. And we'd been lucky enough to be in this movie called Any Given Sunday. It was an Oliver Stone movie. It had 15 big stars that were in it as well. And we wanted to advertise it because we hadn't seen the movie, but we knew we were going to have great prominence in it. And we made this decision to spend $25,000 on an ad in ESPN, the magazine. At the time, there were 16 people or 17 people in the company. I held a company meeting. We all sat around a conference table, and I said, hey, listen, I want to run this ad. At the time, .com companies were like blowing up, and so the ESPN, the magazine, mandated that we pay them up front. I said, we need to get 25 grand together. Who in here doesn't want to take a paycheck and give me take a couple weeks off? I'll give you equity in the company. What does equity mean? Like, all these things were coming up, and they decided, most people were like, I don't vote, we should do this. I'm like, we're not really voting right now. Like, I think we need more equipment, we need to buy more fabric. I'm like, I think we should bet on this. And at the time, the year before, we'd done $400,000 in revenue. And so finishing this year, we were on our way to, or we'd done $1.3 million in the year 1999. We ran this ad December 24th. The ad came out. The movie was like a smash hit. The ad showed that it wasn't just a fictional character in the movie. It was actually a logo. And for a company that had done $1.3 million in total revenue, in the next 2 weeks, I did $800,000 in sales just from running that ad, that people could put that connection of Under Armour is a real company. We want to buy it. So forget private equity and forget the friends. I guess the advice I'll give, and hopefully ending or rounding this story out, I need private equity, I need an angel investor, I need this one. Like, if you can do it, go sell the inventory that you have. Like, it's not raising more money or asking for more capital because it doesn't come with a board seat, it doesn't get a vote. And so, like, you're asking me, what do I want to do to raise money? Like, I want to go sell shirts, shoes, and I'm going to add hats to that center on the building in my office, too. So,
Thank you.
We also have a family business class taught by Professor Napoli. I've done business with and without family. With business, it's got, as he said, it's got to be clear that someone is the boss. It's their business, and then you serve that person. And the advantage is that family generally doesn't quit on you.
Yeah.
They don't quit when it gets hard. Questions? All right. Oh, hey, welcome back. 2 classes.
Mr. Plank, thank you for coming in and speaking with us. Like many others, I also run a business/side hustle, and I enjoy and I love what I do, but I have thoughts where I feel like I'm not doing enough right now. And others around me are excelling, going down a traditional path. You join clubs, score internships, go to recruiting events, and eventually secure jobs before graduation. I personally don't think I want to go down that path and instead want to continue being an entrepreneur. But I feel like I'm setting up myself for failure by going off the traditional path. What advice can you give to someone who's a student pursuing a dream of becoming a successful entrepreneur? And what should I be doing now to make that happen? Or what would you do if you were back in college with the knowledge you know?
You know, I wouldn't say you have to be hard and fast. I'd give you the opportunity to say you can do both. You know, if you're willing to not, like, I'm not a big sleeper. I never have been, like a couple hours. And it's because, you know, at the time too, you want to put as much time into the business as possible because it would take that. But you can get another job. I mean, for me, my trade was, at the time, I had a job offer from Prudential for 45 grand, which is like, you know, to a college kid, that was a lot of money. And I'm thinking, well, that's safe, but my mother was the one too, like, you're not going to do that. And because I know you want to run your own ship. I did continue bartending for a period of time, like, because I could make a lot of money in a short period of time. But at the end of the day, every hour I spent away from the business was like, the business was more valuable than that. But I think that you can start and go work a 9 to 5 or whatever those hours are and be able to find out if your idea can make money. Because the one thing before you start is what any entrepreneur should do is find out if someone is willing to take cold hard cash out of their pocket, off their Venmo, and exchange it for whatever good or service that you have. And you have to have that confidence or that certainty that they're willing to do that and that your idea will make it. But there's a moment of inflection where your confidence and belief in yourself will get tested or pushed that you're going to have to let go. You know, you're going to have to take that leap and go, I'm willing to do it. And for myself at 23, you know, I was going to lose the 40 grand in credit cards, maybe some friends and family money, but it wasn't, you know, it was going to be a couple $100 grand. And I figured if worst case scenario, I could always go sell cars. You know, I think I'd be pretty good at doing that, I guess. And so I can recover. And that's the nice thing about doing it young, because as you do get older, you know, you get family, you have a spouse, you have kids, you have obligations, you have a car payment, house payments, all those things. And at the time, I do encourage entrepreneurs is that if you can get that kind of conviction, get out of the attic, get out of the basement, you know, take the chance and go for it. But make sure that you test it by finding out, can this thing make money as best that you can? You know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Question, by the way.
Great question.
Thanks for writing that out. Well, I'll pass it over to the person behind you.
Good job. You killed that. Hi, nice to meet you. My name is May Higashi. Thanks for coming again. Great question, Lloyd. He kind of sparked my question. I grew up in an entrepreneurial household, and I thought I wasn't going to go that path at all. Started by volunteering, and then I decided I didn't like that, so I went to homeschool so I could start working at when it wasn't legal for me to work. And now I just figured out I do things differently, and that's okay. Trying to be okay with it every day. It's honestly, sometimes I have to convince myself and carry myself through it. I'm wondering, when you were first starting your company, any projects and things, where did you find structure and grounding in terms of professionalism or just holding yourself together? Where did you get your structure and grounding?
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent question, too. You know, as I said, my father passed away when I was 19. You know, I had older brothers, but I never had that that mentor. and I know a lot of you can think, and I get emails from entrepreneurs all the time, Mr. Plank, would you be my mentor? Could we talk? And you always want to do that, but there's no real answer. I got to be honest with you. Like, if we were in the elevator, what advice would I give you? I'd say, to be honest, I'd say exactly what I just said for that question, which is find out if your product can sell, right? And if you can do it, then stick with it and commit to it and believe in it. Resilience is incredibly important, but I don't know if I can beg you or convince you that you should go do this with a, I don't think there's one person that I could send you to that you need that. I'd love you to have it, but it's kind of like life. It's not as realistic as the one consistent thing that you can count on is yourself. And so I'd probably point you there of going, if you've got that belief, you'll reach out and you'll have mentors. And I had, one of mine was, it was a friend of mine's father who was a dentist. And I remember I asked them and brought them the idea of Under Armour. And this is why I'm like, be careful as entrepreneurs. I remember I took them the idea and I'm like, okay, so here's the gig. It's this tight t-shirt that athletes wear under their shirts or their uniforms, and it's stretchy and tight and it's in athletics. And I remember he's like, what you're competing with Nike and Adidas and those guys? And I was like, yeah. And I was so excited to share with him my idea. And I remember he looks at me, he just goes, are you crazy? You're going to get killed. Those guys, you'll never be able to do that. And I remember thinking how crushing that was. Crushing that he would say that kind of so flip, but that I gave him so much power to be able to make me feel down and depressed about it. Because it was and it went very much from this is my most trusted person. Aren't you proud of me and happy for me and excited for me? And it went from that to sort of looking at this guy, and then my opinion of him was he can go fuck himself. We're going to go do this anyway. We'll find our way to do it. Yeah. And so that's why I wish you could have that, but if not, you got you, right? And we got this.
Sarah Blakely of Spanx talked about this. Ideas in their infancy are really fragile, and you have to be very careful who you share them with. A dentist is probably one of the most risk-averse professions there is. Yeah. And Paul Orfalea said this. He says, when people tell you you can't do it, what they're saying is they can't do it.
Yeah.
And so you got to be really careful when it's early. Now, yes, you test your product. He wasn't testing his product. He was looking for feedback. So be very careful with your ideas because they're fragile.
That's a great point, Dave. Great point.
Hi. Thank you for coming. My name is Andy, and I have a kind of a question about mentality. And our class, we're moving through how to deal with failure. As far as picking the right athletes, how do you deal with that? I don't know, me personally, I get anxiety when I have to kind of be more risky and put my money, where my mouth is. How do you deal with that kind of mindset of staying calm, cool, and collected even through riskier situations?
Yeah, I don't think there's a formula for it. I appreciate the question, but there's no way to solve. Is that you have to? Life's about a quid pro quo, right? You can lay in your bed all day and you know exactly what the temperature will be and how you feel, and you can sleep, or you can walk outside and it might rain and it might snow or it might do, 10 other things that'll happen. But I think you have to find a way to at least give yourself some guardrails. That might be the easiest way to do it. Of, what is your risk tolerance? What are you willing to do? And some things where it's okay. You don't have to, because I really do enjoy it. I really do enjoy the juice. I love the competition. And the same reason that I walked on at a place like Maryland instead of going to a Division III school that was recruiting me is because I wanted to wake up in the first week of of August and say, our team's undefeated just like every other team in the country. And no matter where we are, we could win the national championship. The likelihood of us doing that was not that great. But I didn't want to go play in a stadium with 1,000 people, maybe, watching Division III football. I wanted to go into Happy Valley with 104,000 people dressed in white at Penn State, and have them, rooting against you and throwing bottles at you. I wanted to play in the big game on the big stage. And so that's not for everybody, and it's not to say one is better than the other, but it's okay. One of my college roommates was one went and played, Scott Milanovic went and played in the NFL. Another one of my college roommates got a job with Pepsi, and he was driving the truck for Pepsi. And I'll never forget the lessons he gave me. And I remember he was this guy Russ, he's from Pennsylvania, and he was a super risk-averse dude. And I was like, Russ, man, like, you could be my partner here. We could do this together. Because his mom made this chocolate it was like this homemade recipe, and their whole basement would get taken over. So he'd bring the chocolate down, and I'd like steal his chocolate sometimes at night. DJ can attest to that. And he'd get mad, you're stealing the chocolate, but he'd be selling the chocolate like he was an entrepreneur as well. But he wanted to go work for Pepsi. And like one of the lessons that he taught me as well, because I'm like, what, Russ, can you at least just answer the phone? Because at that time, I started Under Armour around May. We were still living together for a couple weeks. Like, can you just answer the phone, like, Under Armour, may I help you? And he's like, I'm not answering the phone that way. So it was like one of those deals, like, do you want to come work with me? Like, we can build this together. He's like, I got a job with Pepsi. Why would I do that? But at Pepsi, they make you drive the truck, and you have to deliver, like, Frito-Lay in all the convenience stores for a period of time. But I'll never forget one thing he said to me, and it's with it or not, but it was, when I think about, like, what's our opportunity, what's Under Armour's opportunity, is that I'm going to sit here and tell you that I believe in my heart of hearts that Under Armour is going to be the #1 athletic brand in the world. Whether that means revenue, whether that means just your affection, whether that means innovation, product, or anything else. But like, I'm going to end and I want to show you something of the way that we think about innovation and being disruptive. But it was the Frito-Lay guy. He'd asked his boss, he said, what's the biggest concern that we should have, as Pepsi or Frito-Lay or what we're doing? He's like, the #1 concern you can have, and this is what I say about brands, this is what I say about our industry, because you guys can look at me and go, you can never compete with Nike. How could you ever do that? In the same way that we can scoff or laugh at On or Hoka or any one of these brands of Wari or somebody else, I don't take anybody lightly anymore. I believe in it. But his boss said to him, the biggest risk we have is that tomorrow morning, everybody in the world could wake up and decide not to eat a Dorito. And they'd be perfectly fine. And it was something that always stuck with me. Everybody could wake up tomorrow and decide not to wear Nike or wear this brand, X or brand Y. They could decide not to wear us, and we've seen that too. But like, if you believe in it and you fight for it, and like there's real substance and heart and soul there, you got a real chance. So risk what you're comfortable with. Don't make yourself, because some people, like, I don't throw up when I take risk. And that's something which is why I need a great finance partner and other people to make. As a public company, you've got to be prudent. But I'm also very different at 51 than I was at 23.
I mean, do you see Steve Jobs famously said you can't line up the dots looking forward, you can only look backwards. Pissed off for greatness is sort of his unofficial mantra. He undersized, walk on. Special teams, I don't know if anyone knows anything about football, but the special teams are the craziest people on the team, and he was the captain of the special teams. So he's got this chip, and it's got this motor that he's had since he's a kid. You see that in entrepreneurs all the time. Thank you, first of all. I want to ask the students actually for some feedback in a second, but I want to sort of talk about the Trojan family for a second. We met, what was it, 3 years ago, I guess?
Yeah.
The former coach, Clay Helton, they were visiting with the football team, and Clay introduced me to you and got to meet James before he was even here. And just sort of fast forwarding 3 years, you're definitely part of the Trojan family now. He gave the commencement address for the Graduate School of Business last year. James, are you a sophomore or junior? Sophomore, right? Now, don't make it go 3 years fast.
Yeah.
Sophomore at Ivy Young. Come on up for a second. Come on up. Okay, let's welcome James, your classmate. All right, James. Sit right here. Sit right here. So, what does it mean to have your boy at USC, which was his #1 school, and for you to be actively involved in what was it like to have your dad come and speak?
Pretty honest.
Go ahead. Here, let me give you this. I'll turn this off.
Go ahead. It's really cool. I get to see him every once in a while.
It's great being with you. Before I talk to James, can I just acknowledge my wife, DJ, my 17-year-old daughter, Catherine, and then my best friend, Billy McDermott, is one of those founders at Under Armour that I talk about, who now lives over in Hong Kong with his beautiful family, too. So if I could just acknowledge them for a second. Thank you very much. But yeah, Trojan family.
Do you feel it yet? Is it real, or is it just this
Yeah,
thing
it's
that
real.
everyone talks about?
Yeah, it's definitely real.
I thought it was total BS when I was here. I really thought it was like a marketing thing. Now every part of my life runs to this place, so it's real.
And as he said, look to your left, look to your right. Those are the people that are going to be in your lives for a long time.
But I had two things that affected me about USC when we came here, and when James was walking around looking at different schools. And it was one of the things that somebody said is that the best thing about USC is that, and I reflected this in that commencement speech, he said, we just have the best spirit. You know, it's like, it's the athletics, but it's the academics, it's the commitment, it's the, seeing people out in the crowd and about, but it really is, it's joining a family and something that is, super very cool, and we love being a part of it to an extension. And so now that we're actually taking our daughter who's going around looking at schools, and I asked her where she wants to go to school. She started with, I want to go to school to California. It was like, so she wants to be out west and not be home, but so we're going to go look at schools for the next couple of days as well. Should be fun.
We'll show you this school, and it'll be a hard decision for you, even though your brother's here.
Yeah.
I want to finish, by the way, speaking of Trojan family, at the beginning of the class, I don't know if Justin was here, but Jonathan Hirschberg not only said hello and thank you.
Oh, cool.
And he said you guys had a hell of a run at Under Armour. We're a big part of the story, so it's
very much
bringing it all home. I want you to, this is a master class, it's sort of starting a global brand. I want you to think about a lesson or piece of advice or a bit of wisdom. There's been a lot today. I saw you taking notes. And I want you to say, what are you going to remember 5 years from now from Kevin's talk? What do you remember 5 years from now? Hands up. Who's got something they want to share? Oh, look at this. I'm gonna give you this. You ready? Loudly. Go.
Focus on the 5% that's wrong.
The consumer is not going to care what you say until they know that you care.
Overpromise and deliver.
Optimism matters.
You have to lead through empathy, love, and listening.
The most important thing for leaders in today's world is empathy.
You're not born as an entrepreneur, you have to practice it.
Don't let anyone else tell you how good you are. The most important thing is product, service, story, and team.
Empathetic leadership is key.
Knowing how you feel and believing in yourself matters.
All you can do is be your best self.
When you're low on cash, don't go to Atlantic City.
Check.
All right, coming
well
down.
done.
Go ahead.
I want to play in the big game on the big stage.
There you go. Coming around. All right, here we go. Let's go.
You're not born an entrepreneur, you have to practice it.
When people say you can't do it, they mean they can't do it.
Hire people that know how to count.
I am not a big sleeper.
At the end of the day, don't forget to sell shirts and shoes.
Good.
The biggest risk is that no one will eat your burrito tomorrow.
Always start with your team first.
Bet on yourself.
Come on, I'll come up. I'll come up. This is good.
Keep your jersey.
Optimism really does matter.
Life does keep moving forward and just have the early hustle mentality.
Let's thank Kevin Plank and his family. Come up, say hello, meet Kevin. We're going to get him out of here.
Can I finish with one last video?
One last video to go.
If you guys will give me 1 second, let me.
The future of it?
Yeah. Do you have that one, or let's see if we figure that one out. If I could tee this up on these guys, if you got a chance to stay for it, I think it's kind of cool. But every brand needs a vision, and so there's a video that we made years ago, but I think it still articulates to me like what the reason for Under Armour is supposed to be. Is to say product, story, service, team, of course. But one thing we do care about, and like what I think about, is that every company should be terrified of what would happen if you were the watch industry. What happened in the watch industry 3, 4, 5 years ago is all of a sudden Apple and decided to invade. And when they did that, they said, we're going to take watches and we're going to go ahead and make them effectively obsolete by inventing the iWatch. So what we do is keeping a little bit of healthy paranoia that comes with us, which means, what if Apple or Tesla started making shirts and shoes? That would be a pretty terrible thing for most people, unless you're building your company to think like Apple or Tesla. And more importantly, if they made a shirt or a shoe, what would it do? And so we want to beat them to it. And so I think in our industry, we still make a shirt and a shoe, frankly, the same way we did 100 years ago. We need smarter people. So what I'm building for UA, what I want to build for UA is, why do we do things when you think about something as important as ESG? You walked in here, the air conditioning's on. And we're air conditioning this room. We're not just air conditioning the bodies that are here, but we're air conditioning the upper left-hand corner, upper right-hand corner of this room too. Why? Why isn't anybody thinking about, what if we had products that could actually, maybe cool or heat the microclimate that exists between my apparel or skin? So the vision we have of is the vision of what Under Armour is supposed to be? We made this as an articulation for our team, which is something I think is pretty powerful, compelling. So I'd like to show you what we think Future Girl is and what someday the future of apparel.
Our job is to make you better. To make all athletes better. To inspire you. To empower you. And to connect you to the world's greatest design and innovation. All you must provide is the will to make it happen.
Thanks very much, Chris.